Okay, call this meeting to order March 30th, 2016. It's the vote orders of conditions for 29 Lobstrom Ave, 33 and 36 Railroad Ave, Cowdy Road, Judah Point Road, Woods Hole Steamship Authority, care of William Woodyan. Okay, if you got cell phones or other electronic devices, if you could silence them, be greatly appreciated. This is a closed hearing, so we will not be taking any comments or any evidence. So we're going to discuss this amongst ourselves and come up with a conclusion to this. All right, so Jen.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, as you know, this is a reconstruction of the steamship terminal down in Woods Hole with the reconfiguration of the existing slips, removal, the raise and rebuild of the ferry terminal, and all associating dredging, filling, and
Grading and landscaping.
I think the best way to take it, Mr. Chairman, is just start at one end of the project and work your way around. So you can either start with the in-water work down at the bulkhead and the reconfiguring of the slips and work your way back, or
Okay.
start
I
with
think
the
we'll
terminal
start. I think
and
this will
work
start
your way
as a
forward.
thing.
Okay.
Bulkhead and work our way back. So.
Okay.
And then finally we'll come to the building, I guess. Okay.
Okay, I think one of the issues that you need to discuss, if we're going to start at the corner of the project, is basically we are redoing the 3 slips, reconfiguring them. We're actually shifting them south. So one of the impacts from slip number 1, one of the concerns is the impacts to the adjacent property owner, that being the impacts to the beach as well as to the adjacent eelgrass bed. So what I would recommend, and was recommended by your consultant, is annual monitoring and surveys. That said, there has to be a good baseline in that area so that it's not just one survey done right before the project starts. So we want to see what the impacts are for the next few years and why the project is going forward. So to do that, the Steamship Authority is going to have to get authorization from the property owner to do annual baseline and post-construction monitoring of the beach and beach profiles and surveys.
So, and that's north and south?
No, that's the Tully's property.
Tully's property.
Yep.
Okay. And then there was something about the hazard of navigation
Beach
he was
surveys.
concerned about, so.
So that would be baseline. And how long after the project is completed would you like to see those surveys? And this project is going to be going on for well over the period that your order of conditions allows for. So we'll have to talk about that at the end, whether you want to issue a 5-year permit for something like this or have them come back in 3 years and issue a 3-year extension. And you could do it either way.
Okay.
So, but I think for at least a period of 3 years after the project is complete, those
After the completion.
surveys should be done.
Wouldn't it make more sense to just have an order of conditions that runs for 5 years and that?
Yeah, I know, we'll talk about it at the
Yeah.
end, but I'm talking about how long after the
Monitoring that.
project is completed would you like to see the
Yeah.
beach
On
surveys
Tully's
done?
property, I'm concerned.
I mean, when can you tell if that's gonna, I mean, you'll be able to pretty much tell.
3 years might be, I think that would be
Okay.
fair. Because obviously it depends on the winters we have and all
Yeah.
that good stuff, so.
Effective operations.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah.
as far as the submerged bulkhead, there has been concerns that that could be a hazard to navigation that should be determined by the harbor master and not this board. So what I
can get a
would
letter
say
from him.
is that they should, prior to constructing that portion of the project, get a letter from the harbor master determining that that's not going to be a hazard to navigation. I think he is better equipped to determine that than this board.
So it would be required under our regulations anyway.
Yep.
There were also some concerns about eelgrass beds. Is our monitoring going to extend to that?
Absolutely, Courtney, I just haven't gotten there yet.
Okay.
From harbor master.
Right, I kind of jumped ahead on that, yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah, I don't have the agenda.
Beaches, beach protection, you can tell us
Is that on, is that in the agenda?
What's that?
Yes.
Well, I didn't get you an agenda?
Yeah.
There's nothing specific in it.
Huh?
There's nothing specific on the written agenda.
Oh, okay. Well, then, that's all right. I'm just pulling it out of memory.
Beach monitoring.
And another concern in that corner of the project was the effect, well, on that corner and the other side, the effect on the eelgrass beds.
Mm-hmm.
So again, we would want to see, even though eelgrass beds move, baseline monitoring, and then monitoring for, I would say, 3 years after the project is complete to determine any impacts.
And that's on, and that was on north and south?
Mm-hmm.
So that would be north, okay.
Because there's an eelgrass bed
Yeah.
on both sides.
Right. About silt fencing,
You mean siltation curtain?
siltation curtain, I'm sorry.
It's okay. So the siltation curtain will need to be deployed while they're doing, the dredging of, the existing bulkhead area where the terminal currently sits. That area, that excavation, as well as the associated dredging of the slips themselves. So, they have written in their supplemental information that they would employ the same turbidity monitoring as was done in Hyannis, where it gets to a certain point and then they stop all in water or water work until it subsides. That said, I think that is a absolute something we should require, as well as the use of the siltation curtains. Now, there is concern that area, that the siltation curtains are not gonna work. So you could require a written monitoring protocol on the use of those siltation curtains and the monitoring of the turbidity, and have it approved by you prior to construction, prior to the start of that type of work. That's something this board wants?
Right, with the usual notification requirements.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, when it gets to a certain point, and your consultant had briefly mentioned it, that just because of the ferries and that area is pretty dynamic, that when the turbidity gets to a certain level, that all work should stop, and there should be some sort of protocol on evaluating these curtains and see if they've failed in any way. So they could write up a very detailed protocol on the use of these. They did write something up in the supplemental information. If that's sufficient, that's fine. If not, we could ask for a separate document detailing that out. Is that something this board wants? Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of this will also be written out in formal bid documents.
Right.
Oh, where was I? Turbidity monitoring.
One of the questions that comes to
What?
mind here, and I'm not sure exactly what the answer is. I have to, we've seen an awful lot of testimony on this, but clearly one of the issues is, and I know we're gonna consider this further on, is the change in grade that they're proposing. And the question is the increased grade in the area of the slips integral to the design of these slips, and the slips design dependent on that grade change? In other words, what I'm saying is if we were to try to separate that out and say that
See that?
we are not buying into the change of grade, what does that do to the slip design?
Well, Courtney, there were other,
I'm just trying to,
there were other plans that were submitted to you that were considered that still had the same slip configuration. So if you're getting to the design of the terminal, let's finish with the slip configuration and move our way back.
Is the structure of the slip dependent on increasing the elevation? In other words, the design of this, in other words, if we ultimately have a problem with the grade change.
Well, that's
That-
something
is
that's something the Steamship Authority will have to address.
Yeah, they'd have to do that.
Yeah,
and come back to
absolutely.
us. Okay.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think what they proposed and the method they proposed in terms of, you know, as they do their changes, rather than try to isolate an entire area, they're localizing it to where the work area. And I think that makes sense.
Okay. Back to the slips, I mean, they are proposing to keep the old bulkhead in place while they do the excavation work on that, plus deploying those siltation curtains, siltation booms, so I think, again, a
Yeah.
detailed monitoring protocol, on how that's gonna happen, in addition to what was submitted, should be required, and I think that would just alleviate a lot of concerns.
Dewatering, all
Yeah.
of that stuff has to be done properly.
Same with spill
I mean, the
containment
dewatering-
plan, written, all that good stuff.
Yep. We come around. I mean, the town has pretty much looked at the drainage. You did have some comments, and I'm gonna go underground and come up. Give me a minute, if you all do have Scott's letter in front of you.
We have to make sure there's, that the material that's
I mean, pretty much,
excavated out is-
Scott, the town engineering department, I mean, had some comments, after the, I can't seem to put my hands on it right now, after the submittal of the supplemental, information, but they pretty much also stated that the steamship authority, did the best, was in a tough situation there, and that given the complexity of the system down there,
Right,
it is what it is.
right.
So, I can't put my fingers on it right now. I want that one, I have this one, so, I mean, there wasn't anything glaring in Scott's second submittal to us that I, felt needed to be addressed. So, obviously, you will require, as you do on projects, including the water filtration plant that's going on right now, to employ an environmental monitor. You have two ways of going about that. It can be an environmental monitor that would be in charge of monitoring all aspects of this project and providing weekly reports to you on the project. The town does it right now on the water plant. I get a weekly update on everything that's going on down there. That was kind of a different situation because that was, it's a town project, but you can, approve the environmental monitor. So that means the steamship authority can provide the environmental monitor to you, subject to your approval, or you can choose one yourself, and the steamship authority would be required to fund that. I would suggest or recommend that you approve that, because then that person will be working with that construction company, and it just is an easier situation that way. And that's the way I've always seen it done. I don't think I've ever seen it done where this board has required that they choose their own environmental monitor.
It doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't. So I would suggest that, their environmental monitor is conditioned on approval. And usually it's either someone in the, there's going to be multiple contractors down there. It'd be someone that has to oversee all of them. So. I think that was done in the bike path too.
Jen, you were talking about weekly reporting.
That's once the project starts. I don't need a weekly report until they start. I don't need a weekly report on the reconstruction of the admin buildings down on
Right.
that. I just want the environmental impacts of the project.
Okay, the only reason I'm saying anything is because I was wondering if you had an alternative to that, but it sounds like the alternative.
Weekly, you could have a monthly update. I think a weekly update is
I think that's a
they
better
usually
idea
develop
if it's-
some
if
sort
it's
of check
practical.
Yeah.
sheet
Yeah,
and go through it that way and monitor the
Right.
different aspects.
that's fine. I didn't mean to say that I wanted to hear an alternative. I thought you were going to offer one, and I was wondering what it was, that's all.
To an environmental monitor?
No, to
Oh, a
submitting
weekly
the
checklist?
weekly reports.
No, it's usually, on a big project, it's usually weekly.
Okay, that's fine.
They
That's good.
have always done that. Well, like I said, the town projects have always, the big infrastructure projects we've had in the town have always done weekly reports
Like
to
the
the
sewer
Concom.
and-
And the water plant, the bike path, the sewer plant down in North Falmouth. Okay, so those types of projects have always had an environmental monitor attached to them, and they've submitted weekly reports to us. And like I said, they develop their own kind of checklist, get it approved. It'll, obviously the environmental monitor and the way they report will have to be approved by you or staff, and, we go forward.
Right.
And any construction project like this is gonna have somebody on staff that does that, so. Coming around, now we get into Courtney and the grading issue. You'll have obviously all of the normal conditions that you put on dredging projects, on the dredging portions of the slips. Whatever time of year restrictions were given by division or in the MIPA certificate, which I can't remember off the top of my head if there were any. But those will be incorporated because that's all incorporated into this record. So now the grading.
So you want to
And
move
the
to
terminal
terminals,
design.
is that what you're saying, John?
Yeah, talk about the terminal. I mean, that was a big, I mean, to be quite honest, the location, position, of the terminal was actually what this board struggled with the most. I mean, I think this board understands that it's, you know, we're reconfiguring a ferry terminal. There is gonna be a certain amount of dredging involved, there is gonna be a certain amount of excavation involved of that, to straighten that bulkhead. I think you all kind of accepted that portion of the project. I think this board had the most trouble with the terminal design, and you need to discuss that and see if the Steamship Authority has alleviated any concerns you've had, or you'd like to discuss that, as well as address the letter by Attorney Sayers and the response by Frank Duffy. Mr. Chairman, I will let you handle that.
Good, Court.
First, before you start that discussion, I think you need to have a finding on the aspect of essential governmental functions and what that means to this
But
project.
if they're doing a temporary terminal,
Temporary terminal, yeah.
right? and
Well, they have to do a temporary
right,
terminal.
Okay, so how would that affect their, whether we're talking about filling this spot or putting it up on piers, you know what I mean? I don't think if they had to, you know, they're building a temporary terminal, so how are we affecting their operation?
I'm talking the main terminal, I'm talking the
finished terminal.
permanent,
Right.
finished terminal.
Right.
I'm not
the
worried about the
difference then.
temporary terminal.
Yeah,
Temporary terminal has to be
but
there.
we're not affecting that during the construction.
No,
Okay, so then it comes down to the fact that,
So,
go ahead, Court.
if I understand this project, and I'm trying to break it into component parts. We're talking about reconstruction of ferries, which we just went through, the slips. We have a whole issue of reworking the stormwater drainage patterns. And I didn't sense from this group that we were okay with what they were trying to do with the basic stormwater control measures, particularly given the constraints of the site. And my sense is that, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but my sense is that portion of it is not necessarily dependent upon how the ferry is designed or the grade is increased, because you still gotta have the same network of stormwater management. Am I reading that more or less correctly? Because what I'm getting at is if we're looking at component parts of this project, I think we can accept the stormwater management concepts that they've done without having to break it out.
I think we can, I think Applied Coastal agreed with that, and I know that Scott in the engineering department is.
Scott looked at the stormwater and the drainage, correct?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it seems like we're on the same page there.
Right. So
And
it's
it was
not-
went
yeah.
over with it, I mean, even before the project was proposed to you, the town engineer at the time was well aware of the drainage design. So,
And the concern was raised about if you're gonna fill in as opposed to put up on stilts,
I mean, I think
whether
that's
you were
the,
gonna cause issues over in the other, what is it, the Buzzard Bay Coalition parking lot, the Nashon, and
correct.
the,
I think one of the issues is whether or not this
Flood
board is
basements.
comfortable with the grading proposed. Your consultant indicated that they felt it would redirect floodwaters. That information was given to the Steamship Authority. They responded by saying that their consultant didn't feel that the flooding pattern was going to change drastically over what it actually is because of the flooding from both Great Harbor, and Little Harbor in the back. So both those bodies of water rise, they come in, they recede, so.
So we have testimony from dueling consultants.
As usual.
As
And
usual,
it's
with,
your job
opposite-
as
with
the
opposite
commission,
conclusions.
as the commission to determine To
Which is more
determine
credible?
which school,
Which is,
which analysis you're more comfortable with.
yeah, which is more credible as far as we're concerned.
I didn't want to use that word. What analysis you're more comfortable with. And whether or not you would like to see. So basically, as it stands right now, the ferry terminal does not meet FWR 10.38 in regards to having the first floor elevation of the building meet the requirement of base +1. Now, the way it's written,
It's not really
You're
written
talking
as a
about the
height
proposed
specific height
terminal?
requirement.
that's where I was getting that. That's the Wetlands Protection Act.
Are you talking about the proposed terminal or what exists?
Talking about the proposed terminal, Courtney.
Yeah, when you said the terminal had, you know.
So you're right, Marion, I'm gonna follow you with that. So it was, the board is always, the board has always interpreted that part of the regulation to mean incorporating 1 foot per 100 years. Well, at a minimum for activities proposed in the AE zone, the historic rate relative to sea rise in Massachusetts of 1 foot per 100 years shall be incorporated into the project design and construction. That's what your regulations state. You've always said that to mean base +1. The Steamship Authority is proposing flood-proofing measures as opposed to this to try to stay consistent with the state building code, which may change. That said, are you comfortable with that? Do you,
The state regulations.
right now we're at base
Do they go
flood.
with the 1+1?
No, right now the state building code, correct me if I'm wrong, Russell, is at base flood. It's at the
It's
base
base
flood
flood.
and the velocity zone regulations are +2.
Correct.
Your regulations under the bylaw are base flood +1 for AE and base flood +2 for velocity zone. So you mirror the state in the velocity zone construction standards, you're more stringent in A zone construction standards. That
And
said,
we
you
are-
have this discussion, you have to go back to whether or not you feel eliminating the fill or modifying it somehow will, or modifying the terminal design or requiring them to meet your regulations will interfere with their essential governmental function.
Correct. And this comes back to the question of what, their design that they were proposing was to not meet that +1 or whatever, but they were gonna waterproof the lower floors.
Floodproof,
and so
correct.
forth.
Correct.
That's a design issue, that, in my view, could be conditioned, assuming we saw a, finalized design. I mean, we're being asked to approve something when it comes to this ferry design that has two concepts. One,
Terminal design.
a terminal, and one is the building itself and its design, and the other is the issue of the grade changes. And the question becomes, does
They need the grade changes to meet the base flood.
right. And so, that's kind of that's where we are. And one of the concerns I have is that I don't, we're sort of being asked to approve a conceptual design as opposed to a fixed deal. That you kind of then go yes or no. And that makes it more difficult in my mind.
It does, but we could just, what we're being asked to do is really, I think, determine which of two approaches we're more comfortable with.
You have to fill in the site.
The
Clearly-
details do matter.
Clearly, these folks
But it's
down there,
environmental impact. It's
yeah,
not
clearly,
us,
in
it's for
these
the
folks,
proposal.
in trying to design this whole project, particularly the ferry terminal and the grade and all of that, they're trying to work with a number of different constituencies as well as the legal requirements. And so it makes it a far more difficult design thing because you're trying to accommodate a lot of interests. And in the end, I think what we have to do is focus on our regulations and the issue about essential government function.
Right.
I mean, would you agree, Jen?
What was that, Courtney, again? I was looking for something, I'm
Yes.
sorry.
We have to focus, in the end, we have to focus on what our regulations say
Correct.
and whether that is consistent with the government function issue.
Correct.
That's really where it comes down to. And I'm still wrestling with the grade change.
I have my own view on that. It's not something where I have expertise, and we have competing consultants. And I read the FEMA documents that were with the last submission, and my own feeling is it's a very large area. They are sticking to no more than 5%. And I don't expect that to be a huge problem. And in any case, I mean, those are the federal standards. And since we all have to pick something to decide on the basis of, that's what I'm picking.
I saw that too. I kind of agree with what you're saying. Maybe really.
I also don't think in that location that the idea of a very substantial building way up in the air is terribly desirable from a wind standpoint and other things. I'm not saying, you know, it's terrible. I'm not saying it can't be done correctly, but they seem really, you know, in terms of pros and cons, I don't see that one clearly, raising it up clearly outweighs the other approach.
And that could be one way the board, you know, has this discussion, is what do you feel more comfortable with in that particular area? I mean, they have submitted multiple designs to you. Obviously, they've gone through multiple meetings with various stakeholders on different designs in different ways to get cars and people to and from the boats. And after multiple meetings and spanning well over a year, this is the design they chose to put forward to you.
Yeah, I mean, the wind issue, I work right down there.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked about flooding and not really said much about wind, but it can be quite overwhelming down there. So it's another consideration.
So we're gonna allow them to go at base flood with flood protection. I mean,
I mean, it's an out in the building.
that's kind of a good compromise between,
The governmental function thing is, either way that we went here, how would that affect that operation? I mean, as long as they had the temporary terminal operating, and they had to redesign to put it up on, so I'm just throwing this out there, not saying that's what I'm for, but how would that interfere with the governmental function? Because they'd still be constructing it, and they'd still be operating because they have the temporary terminal. So you're saying that if we went and put another restriction on that?
You're losing me at the temporary terminal.
Yeah, I don't get
I don't follow what you're trying to say with that one.
What is essential government function?
It's getting people to and from the boats.
Correct. So during this construction, how are they doing that?
They're
Using the
building a
temporary terminal. So how does that, whether
Temporary
they fill the area or they build it up on stilts, how would that affect the essential government function? I can understand what you're saying. You can't put restrictions that would affect it, that they couldn't get
Correct.
people to the boat.
Correct.
But it wouldn't make any difference on what the building was being constructed there.
Well,
Oh.
the
You're looking at the
steamship
finished product.
authority's argument about, so their function, their authority is to get people to and from boats.
Correct.
Their argument on choosing this particular design that does not meet your local bylaw regulations is that to build a terminal that meets that is you're going to require multiple ramping and staging and everything else that would be a hindrance to moving that many people and that many cars in the summertime efficiently and effectively from that area onto the boats and off.
Right. Also people need to buy their tickets and use the restrooms and et cetera.
And this is the
So
design that they
probably need an
feel
elevator.
Feels most
I'm
efficient.
not-
most
Well, you
effect-
use it
that will
between
most
the
effectively and efficiently move the number of people that that terminal does
I mean, I don't
on a
honestly
hot
see.
August day.
I just threw that out there.
No,
because
and
again,
I'm
it's-
like, you kind
it's
of
kinda-
lost me with the temporary terminal.
No, but we
I'm
wouldn't be
in-
interfering with the operation
And you
if they changed the design of the building.
Yeah,
That's my
and
whole
you
thing.
were provided for research, for purposes for this discussion, the alternate designs, and you all had an opportunity
Yes.
to review them and compare them to the design you have. And I think you can make a determination, quite easily based on the information that was given to you. So it really depends on what side of the grading you guys are on. Some of you have real problems with the gradings and concerns. Some of you accept, the standards that they followed and are comfortable with the design presented. That is up to this board.
Go ahead.
I mean, one of the,
I mean, you can
and
go back
I
to the-
appreciate that the advice that we're getting, although conflicting, attempts to be as, number one, objective, and two, as scientifically based. The human experience is such that if something can go wrong, it will. I believe that's Murphy's Law.
Something can go wrong in any situation.
Yeah,
We'll
right,
just deal
but
with
in
it
other
when
words,
it comes.
we've got testimony that,
I mean, look what happened to the town of Sandwich when they put all that sand on the beach.
right, and so you
And
have
then
the
a week
unintended
later, they had a big
consequences.
storm that came and took half of it away.
Right, and so, when we're studying to approve a project, I mean, our focus is on the environmental impact. That's what our job is. It's not on political things and everything else, but is it on the environmental impact? And, I mean, again, I have real concern about elevating the site 5 feet, 4.5 feet on average. Some places more, some places less. And what you're gonna get is an impact. I'm not concerned about still water flooding, because still water flooding is not an issue. I'm concerned about, the kind of flooding that occurs in a major storm, particularly in an area like that where wind-driven water, essentially velocity stuff, is running around, and that's far less predictable. I also am dealing with the precedent that we've set as a commission on other projects where we've been asked to rule on people wanting to alter a coastal bank to raise the grade and that kind of stuff, and we've said no for the very reason it diverts floodwaters. trying to remember, I think it was one out in Chappaquoit that we looked at a few years back and said no. So I'm concerned about that. As far as the impeding of governmental function is concerned, I'm not sure I understand the concern that,
Well, I mean, this is exactly what Frank said. The question before the commission, the question before the commission is whether the Steamship Authority, whether the board can apply FWR 10.8 to a new terminal project without interfering with the Steamship Authority's ability to perform its essential governmental function and have only a negligible effect on its operation. And that's what you have to consider. It's really easy.
certainly getting trucks and cars onto ferries and off of ferries isn't, in my view, the issue. The issue is the terminal being able to service the public.
The public.
And maybe I've been around too long.
Not that long, Courtney, only 10
Yeah,
years.
but maybe I've been around too long, and I've always come to the conclusion that if you want to, you can figure out a way to make something work. There's nothing that defies a solution if you put your mind to it. And so I have a hard time accepting the idea that if this building is elevated by 4 feet above grade or whatever it is, that it can't be designed to accommodate the usage for what it's designed for, which is to accommodate people to go get their tickets, go to the restrooms, come out, do all that stuff that they normally do in the ferry terminal. And I realize the ADA issues and the ramps and so forth. But, I mean, if these folks can design slips that work and they can do that stuff, there's got to be a way to design a ferry terminal that's accessible and yet meets our regulations and so on. I'm having a hard time with that. So the question is, what do we do? Do we need more information? Do we need to see a design? Do we need, do we have enough information to make a judgment at this stage of the game? One
Well, your
possible.
hearing's closed, Courtney, you can't reopen it.
No, I don't
So
intend to.
you
But
need to make a
perhaps we can,
determination.
I mean, if we're uncomfortable with the terminal building, then maybe we can divide our decision into 2 parts, and one is to approve the other work and deny the terminal.
I'm gonna say that you have approved and denied portions of projects in the past. I'm not
I mean,
gonna say
I'm-
you've never done it, you have, that's an option for this board. Mr. Chairman, I mean, that's an option you have.
Yeah, I understand. I just, you
It's
said
how
it
it's-
earlier, they did work with the community down there. They came up with a plan. I mean, I'm not all that thrilled with the filling either, but I think it's workable. To me, I'm kind of leaning on that. Approve it as presented. That's what I'm looking at. Jamie?
I agree. I think
Yeah,
with
that's
these,
kind of what I said.
I mean, that's fine, it could be, I mean, Courtney, your concerns are valid,
Absolutely.
absolutely valid.
Well, and I, I mean, obviously there's 4 of us that are going to cast a vote.
It's funny, in a project like this, with all that's associated with, the grading is the one thing that, this board grappled with the most. I mean, you've seen dredging projects before, you've seen, other large in-water projects, the whole, Inner Harbor being redesigned and everything like that.
I mean, I
It's just
just don't,
interesting
I have.
to
see,
your
I-
staff that the
what-
grading is the one
What's
thing that-
sticking in my throat
Yeah?
is, there's a big unknown about this grading. That's what I'm hung up on.
Well, oh, and I know, Courtney, I understand
That's what I'm
that.
hung up on. I'm hung up on the grading. As far as the design of the terminal, if they want to set the elevation, or whatever elevation they want, and they can meet our regulations, or with some kind of an exemption, they can meet the building code regulations, and it sits up in the air, fine, I don't have an issue with it. I realize there's an aesthetic issue. People would rather see buildings that don't sit on stilts. And we get these things in front of us all the time.
Well, you know where I
Okay, we're
stand.
gonna go on stilts, can we enclose the bottom so we don't have to look at piles, right? And we anguish over breakout panels that flop and don't flop and all that.
Oh, you know where your
So,
staff stands
but
on
you
that,
know,
Courtney.
frankly, that if a thing has to be elevated because it has to meet building codes and flood codes and so forth, and it has to be on stilts, I don't see where the problem comes in that it can't be designed to have the appropriate access. I mean, you know, there are a lot of public buildings in this country that are a hell of a lot larger than this proposed terminal, and go farther up into the air, and it meets all the ADA requirements and the access requirements, and so I'm not sure what's hanging this up, to be honest with you. I'm fine with the building at the height. I'm not fine with raising the grade.
Okay, well, I think.
That's me.
I know, I think you clearly know where you stand in this discussion. I mean, we can go round and round. I mean, you'll write an order, you'll get additional, protocols written regarding the in-water work, the dredging, the monitoring. I mean, you can lock all that down. It's whether or not this board feels comfortable with the fill. And I think you all are there. You just need to take the vote. Because it's either gonna, and if it, you can approve it as is with the different types of conditions that you've talked. You can review the bid documents when they go out. We'll have a meeting with the contractor prior. You're gonna have all the conditions you have on any other large-scale infrastructure project. It's whether or not this board is, or the four of you are comfortable with the grading. If you're not, we can always take a different vote and it can go a different way. You can approve it or split the project in two and have them come back. I mean, that's where you're at.
So you're
I mean,
talking
you
about
don't-
taking a vote on this issue in isolation?
No. I'm saying taking a vote and see where it falls. And you've always said, okay, that didn't work, we need another vote. But I mean, obviously, I don't think this board, from what I've heard, has a problem with the reconfiguration of the existing slips. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Correct.
All right, you're all comfortable with the piling, monopile design, the 3 slips, the relocated bulkhead, and all of that, correct? Okay. And now you have the terminal. And I think I know where this is gonna end up, but, Mr. Chairman, just put a motion on the table to approve the project as is with the conditions that were discussed, with the conditions you usually put on larger projects, pre-construction meetings, environmental monitor, weekly reports, all of that, all of the protocols that were written up in the supplemental information, all of that. And we will see what happens, and if we have to take another vote, you'll take another
Motion
vote.
forward, Mary.
So moved.
What's that?
Second?
Motion to approve what we have in front of us.
The whole project.
the whole project.
With-
As discussed, as presented and conditioned as discussed.
And condition as discussed, yeah.
Um,
I've got a motion and a second, so.
Okay,
You wanna
so now
discuss?
this discussion.
Sure.
I mean, I think you know where I'm gonna come down on this, and I'm gonna vote no on it. And that's too bad, because I'm not opposed to anything except the issue of grading and terminal. And,
You can always modify the motion and piece it out too. I mean,
I
that's
mean,
really,
I would ask that maybe we look at, consider it in two pieces. And maybe the vote comes out the same way. That's fine too. You know, that's why there are four of us and why we deliberate, and, you know, we can disagree and then we move on. I mean, that's the way the process ought to work. Sometimes in our political life, it doesn't work that way, as we've been seeing in the current campaign debates, but, you know, we're very civil here. So we can disagree and move on.
Okay, so, but I have a motion right now, to
All
take
right.
the whole thing as a package.
Okay, so
Do you,
Shall I untable or withdraw
yeah,
my
why
motion?
don't, you can,
you can withdraw the motion, and we
Withdraw
can
the
divide it
motion
into
and-
two parts. I'd prefer.
I think the vote's gonna come out the same way, but,
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
All right, so I will,
make a motion to
Move.
split the pier and the
yes,
terminal.
we will set aside for the moment the question of the fill and the terminal
Terminal building.
design. And we'll vote on the
the,
pier and all the,
The
and
slip
all the
recon-
monitoring and
Yep.
Yeah, all the
and all
related
the
stuff.
dewatering and all the stuff that goes with it.
the slip
Discussed earlier.
reconfiguration, the relocation of the bulkhead and all associated monitoring, annual surveys, all of that.
Yes,
The
and,
drainage work,
and the requirement for the harbor master's approval.
okay.
Okay. So you made the motion, Jamie seconded it?
Not that one.
Not that one? So I need a second.
I'll second that.
Courtney seconded. Okay?
Just thought it was appropriate.
So we have-
So
I'm
first,
thinking spirit.
so the first thing we're voting on is that.
is the pier as discussed.
Yeah.
The
Okay.
terminal redesign. The only thing you're pulling out of that is the grading and not the terminal,
Right.
the pier reconstruction, I'm
Right,
sorry.
as discussed earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll call, any other discussion? Okay, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, it sounds unanimous. So we accepted that part of it. Now we'll go back to the terminal. So why don't we put a motion forward, and then we'll discuss it again? We'll open up for discussion, Courtney? Fair enough?
Yeah, I'll put a motion on the table that we accept the terminal design and the related grading, and with the conditions that we've discussed.
As presented, right, okay.
Second.
So we have a motion by Courtney and a second by Mary. Discussion.
I don't, for the sake of brevity, I won't repeat my arguments again, but I don't have a problem with
Clarify that
elevating
for
the
me.
terminal. I don't have a problem putting it on stilts. I don't have a problem with them coming up with a design to have appropriate access as a result. I do have an issue with the grade change. And if that means that that form of the project is down, that's fine. And my attitude is that if we're denying it for these reasons, and the findings, if we deny it, are that, you know, we don't feel that it inhibits the governmental function, obviously, then it's gonna be incumbent on them to come back to us with a design that does meet our regulations and does accommodate the governmental function. And where my concern is, despite what FEMA may say, I mean, we've gotten conflicting testimony, and that enough raises a red flag, is that if we know that what happens in storms in that area with the grades as they are, we know what we know. What we don't know, testimony aside, is by raising those grades by 4 feet in that area, that's a significant increase. What I am concerned that Murphy's Law and what can go wrong and the impact on the surrounding area could be very detrimental, and I would hate to find out the hard way. That's why I'm very much against it. I'm not opposed to the terminal. It's necessary for the Woods Hole Steamship Authority to upgrade their terminal to service their clients.
Absolutely.
And I know that, and I don't have a problem with that at all. I have a problem with raising the grade. And I also think they can design this thing to accommodate access by people and meet their other obligations without having to put 4 feet of fill in that whole area. That's where I am at.
Okay. So, but your motion was to approve as presented, correct?
My motion was to approve as presented because it's a positive motion.
Good. So,
But, so
you good
you
with
could
this
vote.
clarification, where Courtney stands on it?
Isn't that the same motion that we had a minute ago?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's the
basically.
same motion, but he gave us reasons why he was not. in
I'm
favor.
making the motion to approve, but I'm also in discussion, saying
Right.
that I'm opposed to it, and so I'm gonna vote against my
I got
motion,
you. Thank you. I follow.
if that makes sense.
See, we already have, I believe, one alternative that does meet our regulations. Just not to say that we can, it's not really what was presented, so it's not to say we can sit here and approve it today, but, I'm just making the point that there is such a design. And I guess the arguments against it is, one, it didn't suit the community, and that's not really our concern. And the other is that it would cost about $20 million more. And I think we should consider that as part of the governmental function and whether we should be, what weight that should have in our decision.
Okay. I'm gonna go back to the beginning. This was all agreed upon, or I think the Steamship Authority did a good job in reaching out. I think the community has done a good job in providing us with information. I know where I'm voting. I'm gonna vote for it as presented. So, that's where I'm at.
I feel the same, on
Yeah.
balance, yes.
Yeah, I just don't know. I mean, I guess there's really not everybody's gonna be happy, so I'd love it to work out that way, but I don't think it's gonna happen, so. I'm where I'm at, and I'm not gonna change my position, so.
I agree.
Okay, any other discussion before I call for the vote? Do we need does this have to be unanimous, Jim?
No,
No.
it needs a quorum of the
Okay.
board. That would be
Quorum,
3 of.
It's decided by
Quorum of,
majority vote.
yeah.
If it's a tie vote,
That's where we.
then
goes
it's,
down.
what's the,
If it's a tie vote, it doesn't pass.
Doesn't
it
goes
doesn't
down.
pass.
It
that's
doesn't
all.
pass, and they have to redesign the terminal.
Yeah. Okay, so
You
I'm
need
gonna
at
call
least
for the
3.
vote then, if there's no other discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. 3-1.
Okay?
Courtney abstained. Okay. What else we got on this that we need to
Nothing.
discuss?
We don't need to discuss anything else.
Okay.
You can adjourn until 7 o'clock.
Yes,
And
that
then I
sounds
will
like a
see
good
you all
idea.
back here.
Somebody want to make a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Mary and Jamie, and this meeting is adjourned.